Hi, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of Real Talk with Rick. So this episode, I was able to bring in another Eden Prairie resident. I learned someone also who was kind of born and raised and grew up in Eden Prairie. But my connection with him is that he works at a law firm in downtown Minneapolis that works on behalf of the city of Eden Prairie and other suburbs of similar size and type to ours, where he works at the state legislature lobbying on our behalf of interest to Eden Prairie and similar suburbs. So I brought Poul. I brought Tom in to talk a little bit about what he does working at the Capitol for interests related to the city of Eden Prairie and other cities, but also a little bit of discussion on his background, what led to a career in that field, and also a little bit about growing up and living in Eden Prairie. So Tom has a great perspective on being an Eden Prairie resident and growing up here, and I'm pleased to provide this podcast where you could listen to my conversation with Tom Poul. Tom Poul, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yes. I mentioned in the introduction that you're a resident of Eden Prairie. You spent some time on our planning commission, and I've known you as well because of the work you do at your law firm on behalf of our city and cities of similar size. So it's great to have you here. But what's interesting is I think I met you with your work with the law firm before I even knew you're a resident. I think it's possible, if I remember correctly, I ran into you in one of the Eden Prairie liquor stores, and I think you were doing a little bit of shopping at Eden Prairie Liquor on a Friday afternoon, and I said, Tom, it's good to see you. What are you doing here? And you said, Rick, I live here.
Supporting the city.
Supporting the city. That's exactly right. That's exact. That money goes back into the city. You know that.
I do.
You do know that. But but I just learned about 15 seconds ago that not only are you a resident here, you are born and raised EP.
I am indeed.
Yeah.
Born and raised. So my parents moved here in around 1963. Bought a Rambler over by on Duck Lake, and that's where I grew up with my brother and parents. Went to Prairie View Elementary. Walked across the street. Was a flag guard and did my duty in helping the other kids cross the street. But lived and grew up in Eden Prairie and have thoroughly enjoyed it.
Good. Do you think the flag guard duty was maybe kind of a lead-in to wanting to get involved in political science and government? Maybe that was a kind of a build-up to that?
It certainly could have been.
Yeah.
I think important when people provide younger people opportunities, and that was just one of those early leadership opportunities at an introductory level that certainly carried on in different ways in life.
Good. So you went to high school, Eden Prairie High School?
Went to Central Middle School here, and then went to Eden Prairie High School. We were actually the first class into the new high school, which looks totally different now, but was really a unique opportunity because when I started high school, the Central Middle School was the high school.
Was the high school, right.
And then we transitioned when they had completed the construction and went into that school.
So what did you, as a freshman, you went right from middle school to what would be the new high school that was built? Were there still other kids that were high schoolers?
Sophomore.
Okay.
I was a sophomore when we went in. I graduated in 1984.
Okay. In the new high school, but there was a time when if the Central Middle School was the high school, where were all the 7th and 8th graders going?
They were at what was Central Middle School at that time, which is now the administrative building for the schools.
Same area.
Same area. Kitty corner.
Got it.
From where it's located.
Understood. Actually, have you been in where the gym is in the administrative building? And I think it's an old gym, so I don't know if we go back to the early part of the 20th century, if that administrative building may have been the high school way, way back when, because there was a dedication recently where they kind of reopened that old gym in the admin building that's part of that area. It's pretty fascinating.
It is. I specifically remember that middle school, or now the admin building, in part because I was in, I think it was 7th grade math, and I was not paying attention as closely as I should have, leaning back in my chair, and it pulled out, and I went back and I smashed the back of my head against one of those radiators, and I split the back of my head open. And I remember kind of feeling blood on my hand and going, oh, this isn't good. And then the teacher looking at me and went, oh my God, and get to the principal's office. And I remember taking a quick trek down to the hospital and getting sewn up. So that is a building I'll never forget.
Oh, wow.
For many reasons, but certainly that's one of them.
Absolutely. And you remembered it was math class and you weren't interested and you were leaning back. If it had been like...
I do, and unfortunately
social
that
studies.
theme carried on through high school and college. Math was just never
opposition
my
math.
thing.
Okay.
I did what I needed, but it never came easy.
It never came easy. So you graduated class at 84, Eden Prairie High School. It's interesting. Well, I suppose when you think about this decision, I've talked to a couple other people here about how Eden Prairie was fast growing, kind of in the 80s and into the 90s, maybe like the 70s and 80s. Your class of 84 might not, it might be starting to grow then, right? Do you remember like what your class size was at that time?
It was starting an upward trajectory. It was much smaller. We were a couple hundred at that time, and it has grown immensely.
It has. I think there was a time in the 90s where they're talking about second high school.
Yes.
And then they kind of pulled back, and then they're still not down to a couple hundred. They kind of know. It's leveled out a little bit. But that's interesting. So where did you go to school, and what did you study after high school then?
Yeah, I went to the University of Minnesota in Duluth. There were a number of other Eden Prairie residents and classmates from my grade and other grades that were at Duluth that said, you ought to come here. It's a great school. So I went and participated the best I could. And I think for me, what really struck my interest in kind of the profession I'm in now was one of the people that I lived with was in student government. And so he roped me into different committees and things I never would have participated in, but for him saying, I need somebody to sit on this committee or do this, and watched that process and really became interested and engaged in student government. And so I spent a lot of my time outside of the academic piece in student government and ran for student body president and won. And so I was able to really participate at more of a policy level with the university as well as the other campuses. I interacted and engaged with the Board of Regents and went to their meetings and really appreciated the opportunity to see how a university is run, not only at our campus in Duluth, and there were a number of issues, and whether it was access to the library or the copy machine, this or other issues with student government. That was also an opportunity to engage, probably the first time I engaged with the legislature, is lobbying on student issues at the Capitol.
At the Cap, wow. But, I mean, it isn't just I was involved in student government. You were elected student body president for the entire school.
I was. And
how was that campaign? What did you run on?
The campaign... dirty tricks are still out there. They were there when I was there. In fact, my opponent, his slogan was "TP belongs in the bathroom, not in office."
Okay.
So he was slinging some mud early.
Yeah, he was.
It didn't work, but
wow.
It was.
Did you even know the guy? Did you know the guy? You just jumped on your initials like that?
I did know him in the sense that he also participated in student government, not significantly. He was, I would say, more of a fringe individual within it, but decided he was going to run, and we'd have debates, and he decided to go with the slogans around campus, and there were a number of them. He was very creative. I'll have to give him that.
All related to TP.
All TP.
Tom Poul
That's
in the
right.
bathroom.
Not in office.
Really? Didn't work, though.
It didn't work. And
see, that was your first, maybe, because I thought we've been told that negative campaigning does work. But that example for you winning that election, negative campaigning did not work.
In that instance, I don't think it did.
Because you didn't go negative on him, did you?
I didn't.
No, you stayed above it all.
I did.
Let's focus on the campus issues of the day.
Campus issues and then getting people to vote. Apathy is a huge problem, as you can imagine, with college campuses, although maybe today a lot less so than when I went. But people were just not overly engaged on policy issues, and so it was harder to get people to show up, let alone get them to vote for a candidate. So getting people to actually show up was a big part of it.
Sure.
But I stayed positive.
No, what a great introduction to legislative issues in the state of Minnesota that is, right in that. So then what did you do then as you continued your time at Duluth?
Yeah, so I think, when I was in Duluth, I also took a constitutional law class that I really, really enjoyed. The professor was really engaging, and it's not a topic I had really any interest in prior, but I think between the public policy debates and discussion, the regents' interaction, and then this constitutional law gave me an interest in government and policy, and so I applied for and was awarded an internship with Congressman Bill Frenzel, who represented Eden Prairie, Edina, a number of suburban cities in Washington, D.C. And so I was able to go from Duluth out to D.C. To work on his staff.
And so he was in office. This is prior to Congressman Ramstad, and he was in office was like 71 to 91. So he was a long-term congressional representative for the Eden Prairie area. So you picked that because that was where you lived.
That's right.
That's where your home is. But through college, applied competitively for an internship, went out to D.C. and what was that? It was summer in D.C.
Summer in D.C.
How'd that go?
It's incredibly exciting for somebody just coming out of college. Really eye-opening. You've got the center really of government of the world right there. And I think the beautiful part with Congressman Frenzel is he really took his internship program seriously. He involved us. We had weekly meetings where we would sit in his office, and he would ask us, what are your thoughts on issues of the day? I remember one of the big issues of the flag burning amendment at the time. And he'd say, so how would you vote on this? And we could all go around the room and talk about that. So it wasn't just opening mail. He substantively allowed us to participate. He also sent us to watch committee hearings. We got to go to the White House. We got to go on the floor. Really a lot of opportunities that provided a broad-ranging experience in D.C. Go to the Supreme Court and listen to oral arguments. So that was really eye-opening and exciting, a bit frightening. One of the first things that happened to me when I got there, I was living in the Georgetown dorms. And so when the Georgetown students were out for the summer, they left, and interns like me could go and rent a room there. So I did that and had moved all my stuff out, my little TV, my suit, the whole works. Got on the subway, went to the office for the first day, exciting. Come back home at the end of the day, the door is wide open, and everything was gone.
Uh-oh.
All of it. I thought first, maybe I went to the wrong room.
Sure.
Checked. Nope. Somebody stole it all. So that was an interesting way to start.
Wow.
A little frightening. But, you pick up the pieces. I called Mom and said I need some financial help to get a suit and tie and move on. And the office was very helpful in helping me coordinate through that.
But it was. Did you lose any prized possessions? Was it mainly just your clothes that you had?
It was primarily my clothes. I think what we found out was that the student living in that room prior was my size. And so he just took everything that seemed to fit just so nicely.
Yeah.
So it was. I mean, there were a few mementos that I wish I could have gotten back that are gone. But apart from that,
but you
pick up the pieces and move on.
No, you knew you were going to be there for the summer, and so you still have those clothes. Are you still?
I still do.
Still wearing?
It's
those?
A blue blazer and khaki slacks.
Nice, good. So what happens with your following your summer in D.C. with Congressman Frenzel? What else what happens after that?
So I came back to Minnesota and went to law school at William Mitchell Law School. I was fortunate enough to be able to participate in a night program. So I went to law school at night, and I worked during the day clerking for a district court judge. And so I had the opportunity to be in court every day and really see a variety of legal aspects, whether it's the litigation part, whether it was civil commitments, family law. They rotated. So I got to see a little bit of everything, which was really exciting and something I really thought I wanted to do.
Sure. And was there a point, and I majored in political science as well, and I thought I was on a path to go to law school, but I didn't. Was there a point where you were involved in being student body president? You worked for a congressperson. Were you thinking, was there a time where you just might go political and not necessarily into law school? Or were you thinking, I want to go to law school because I still might be involved in government or politics? But no, you kind of went the law school route in terms of moving into that area completely.
Right. It's a good question. Honestly, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was in college. And so for me, I was just trying different things that I thought I might like or not like. And it did spark a passion when I hit some of the government and political, legal aspects. But even within that realm, I didn't have a driving desire for elected office or know that I wanted to practice law. So I think with law school, I, again, tried to get a variety of opportunity within different areas and see what I liked. And
Sure.
when I was clerking for the judge, being in the courtroom did intrigue me. And I thought, I wouldn't mind litigating.
Sure.
So I did pursue a career in litigation. I went to work for an insurance defense law firm out of law school.
Okay.
And found that really interesting. I think there's a lot of unique things that happen. And this one, they had me working with attorneys defending professional cases of which I knew nothing about and really didn't even know how to practice law at the time. And the
so they
lawyer,
do they feel pretty good about having?
well, I think
hey,
they
I'd
feel,
like to
I think they
introduce you
feel
to
even
Tom.
worse now
Yeah.
because
Here's Tom.
the partner that I work for had massive heart problems within a couple months of me starting and said, you just need to take this over and go with it. Here's the files. You got to do it. And I stumbled through it. It's one way of learning. You figure it out.
Right.
And, I went across the state and appeared before judges half the time. I tried to be as prepared as I could, but didn't really know what I was doing. And you learn.
Well, you didn't
And
have
you
the
figure it out.
experience. It doesn't
Right.
matter how much you study. You didn't have the experience.
And they just didn't have the resources to have somebody with me all the time. So you learn.
But when you're litigating, you're there on behalf of that. Is it that individual, or is it usually their hospital or their law practice, or how did that?
In
how
part,
did
it
that
depends
work?
on who you're representing. In this case, I was representing the insurance company. So the
Okay.
insurance company sent me to defend the engineer that had a claim filed against him, for example.
Okay.
And so I would have to take depositions, interview people, try and understand what happened, and then make the claim or make the case going forward.
In court.
Yes.
So baptism by fire to some degree. You did that for a while, learned a lot, but thought this isn't what I want to do for the rest of my
Wasn't
life.
my passion.
Wasn't
my passion.
Okay.
And so I
Good.
said, I want to make a change, and I did feel like the government relations, the government piece of that law practice had the most interest to me. And so I, like many people, just did some informational interviews. I didn't know anybody in the space. I didn't know any lobbyists, any government affairs people, but just met with a lot of really nice people. And somebody, actually, it was a connection through the Frenzel office, Jeff Michelle, who was a former state senator
sure.
here,
Yeah, I remember him.
that worked for Congressman Frenzel, suggested I talk to Judy Dutcher, who was then the state auditor, said she needs some help for government affairs. And so I applied for that job and was fortunate enough to get hired to really represent or look after the interests of the state auditor at the legislature. And the state auditor, it's a constitutional office that really has oversight over local units of government.
Right. So, yeah, our city, counties, we have a lot of interfacing with the state auditor. They issue a lot of reports. They look into government finances. So was there, in your time there, were there any interesting issues or cases that you dealt with the legislature and the auditor's office during the time that you were there?
Yeah, I think that there were. To start, it was really helpful training for me because I learned a lot about tax increment financing and state pensions, different kinds of reports that they do, which I didn't know anything about prior. So that was, from a baseline, very helpful professionally. Also, understanding how an agency gets funded. What is the process for the legislature to look at another constitutional office, which is different than some other agency funding, how that works. Also, Judy Dutcher, as a constitutional officer, sat on the State Board of Investment. And so there were a lot of questions on what the state should be investing in. And tobacco was a big issue at the time. There were other foreign countries asking whether or not our state funds should be invested in those. And so there was a lot of debate and dialogue. Again, interesting, something I knew nothing about.
Yeah, at that time, like what
coming in.
the portfolio of cities, and it's interesting, cities cannot really invest in securities and stocks. So we're very, very limited, but I think the state has more discretion. It is interesting. We've had some people where I've worked here and in Hopkins in our finance division that have worked at different times in the state auditor's office, but their job was they audited city finances. They came to your location and audited. You were more on the government affairs side of things.
Correct.
And then did that then lead to working for a law firm then?
It did. I took one other stop with the Department of Labor and Industry, helped supporting the general counsel in a legal and legislative role relationship. Then an opportunity opened at a law firm called Messerly & Kramer that had a large government relations practice, and I was fortunate enough to have an opportunity to help support their team in representing clients at the Capitol and among state agencies.
And that's been a little over 20 years.
A little over, yeah.
22 years. 22 years. And I've known you in that role for about 8 or 9 years. So I do want to hear about some of the other interesting stuff with Messerly Kramer that you've done, but maybe talk a little bit about what you do for Eden Prairie and similar cities of our size.
Sure. I think it's one, people may ask, well, why does the city of Eden Prairie need somebody looking out for their interests at the Capitol, which is a very good and valid question. And I think the short answer is that the state has a lot of oversight, a lot of ability to regulate what you can and can't do as a city. And the suburbs need to protect their interests or the interests of the residents of the suburbs. The state of Minnesota has lots of different cities, and lots of different entities represent greater Minnesota or the core cities. And so everybody has a little different take. We're all in it together, but everybody's looking after their own interests. And the Municipal Legislative Commission, which is a coalition of 16 suburban cities that Eden Prairie is part of, formed back in the 70s really to look after the suburban interests that hadn't happened previously. And there was a fair amount of Robin Hood going on where maybe greater Minnesota would look and say the suburbs have a little extra money that we could use, and they would try and pluck that for their interests. And Jim Miller, the former Minnetonka city manager, started this group and said, we need to find a way to represent our interests, and the Municipal Legislative Commission formed. And it's a group that does just that, really focuses its efforts at the legislature to try and make sure the residents are protected and to advocate for specific public policy that would be helpful.
Correct, and I think some of the bigger ones, and they're pretty consistent probably over the last couple decades, are property tax issues and property tax relief. So
Yes.
We've always pushed for property tax relief going straight to the individual taxpayer. There's a program where sometimes money is given from the state of Minnesota directly to local governments to use within their budget and doesn't go directly to the individual. And the cities that you refer to in our commission, the Woodbury's, Maple Groves, Bloomington, Edina, Minnetonka, similar cities, that we don't receive that local government aid. So that's always been one issue, right?
Correct.
Transportation. There's always the question of suburban taxpayers do pay a lot into the state of Minnesota, but what are we getting back in terms of transportation improvements?
Right. You're absolutely right. I think it is trying to figure out how we can be helpful for the suburban resident. And the state plays a role in that. There's a partnership with cities, and it looks different for different regions. As you indicated, greater Minnesota doesn't have as strong a tax base, and they rely on the state for funding more than the suburban communities. But the suburban communities pay a lot into the state, and a lot of people need help. Not everybody's similarly situated. You have people on fixed incomes, and they do need help. So property tax relief is really important, and relief that goes to the person that needs it most is where we focus our effort, as opposed to relief going to a community for that community to then decide how they want to allocate it. So I think that's an important aspect, as well as other kinds of tax issues. It gets into the weeds, but there's a lot of economic development support that cities can use, whether it's tax increment financing or other mechanisms, in order to partner with private companies to help build successful businesses in the community. And so that's important to make sure that cities have the ability to utilize that.
That's big jobs and economic development. I was just thinking about our platform, our legislative platform as a commission. A lot of issues related to local government finance, transportation, and jobs, economic development.
It is. It's a big topic, as is transportation. Anybody that lives in the suburbs knows and loathes congestion and how we work through that. And there is funding for transportation from the state, but it's not meeting the needs, and it's not meeting the needs of the transit community either. And so both of those are something that we're advocating for more investments for, as well as dollars that come to the city, to the region, as opposed to dollars for big projects like the 35W 494. They're all important, but there's not enough resources coming to make the kind of improvements we want to make. So we strongly advocate for more dollars for transportation improvements.
So what you do, you have relationships with the legislators that represent the 16 suburban cities. You know who they are, you're connected to them, they're a strong voice at the Capitol. So is it a matter of how you work with them, or even sometimes working with the central cities, the Minneapolis, the St. Paul's, the regional cities, greater Minnesota? Is it also a matter of trying to educate some of those legislators, or is it a matter of focusing on our legislators? Can you give me a flavor for kind of what you're doing, what
Sure.
you have to do up there?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think you hit it on the head with education. It is really important to provide information to our policymakers. You have to understand, they come to the table, some new legislators, some that have been around a long time, but they're inundated with all kinds of issues. So many people come to them with concerns. It's hard for them to know a lot about everything. So we need to make sure they understand what the city needs are, and to make sure they're connected with you, with the city council, with the mayor, to understand what your priorities are or what the issues are. There's all kinds of different, not only funding issues, but policy issues that affect every resident of the state. The state legislature can change the speed limits for the cities. There are regulations about small cell siting,
Right.
And so people may say, what's that? But those are the antennas or towers that help provide cell service. And, there's issues about how many of those should there be, and what does that look like if it's in your backyard as opposed to somebody else's.
Or your front yard.
Right.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And so those are issues that I think many legislators wouldn't know much about until you have the opportunity to sit down and explain to them, this is what's happening, this is what either the cell phone companies want to do in this situation, or this is the impact it would have on the cities. Is there a way we can work together to make sure that people have the new 5G or 4G coverage, but don't have towers everywhere that aesthetically would be less than appealing?
No, I mean, that specific example I know is somewhat detailed, but legislators will meet with the AT&Ts, the Verizons, and they'll say, don't we all want 5G? And it seems rather simple and straightforward. Well,
Right.
Of course we do.
Right.
And like you said, Tom, they don't realize that the deployment of that means a lot of antennas in a lot of people's front yards. And as cities, we're just trying to regulate how tall they are, how they look, that they actually make a payment for a permit because they're in the city right-of-way. And you're right, we've had a couple meetings with all of our legislators, and they're looking at us and saying, well, I didn't even know that was an issue. I just think about 5G and how nice it'll be. And I know that's kind of a detailed example,
in the weeds,
but you're right.
But it is the interaction with the legislature. It's also the interaction with the administration, with the governor's office and the agencies, whether it's the Department of Revenue or Management and Budget. They all have interaction with cities in different ways, whether it's through some of these fiscal programs or some of the policies that they pursue, or regional government. The Metropolitan Council or the Airports Commission both have impact for the city of Eden Prairie in terms of whether it's transit or wastewater or parks. The MAC with our Reliever Airport, they're all related issues to the city that it helps to have engagement on from a professional level where you can talk through some of the issues and policy that's coming forward.
Yeah, I do know that every January, it's typically January, we bring into the city council workshop the legislators, the five. Typically we get most of them that represent Eden Prairie or part of Eden Prairie, our 2 state senators and our 3 representatives. And we invite you, and you've been in the audience, on behalf of of the commission kind of listening and hearing about what our council members are saying about issues specific to Eden Prairie and all the areas you and I just discussed, including, anything financial, transportation, Met Council, in the airport. So, yeah, we appreciate that. With your, in your area, is there any other projects, anything interesting that you've kind of worked on over the last 21 years besides on behalf of our cities that might be of interest?
Absolutely. I think there's a couple that have strong connections to Eden Prairie. One is the Southwest Transit facility. The Suburban Transit Association is an entity that I'd represented for years, and that is the transit provider for Eden Prairie, Chanhassen, and Chaska. And I have to say kudos to Len Simich, who's the executive director at Southwest Transit, just a pioneer in this area. And I think we take it for granted that we have a 5-level parking deck that is there to support the transit service. But you need a vision and a leader. And Len was that leader on this public-private partnership where he comes in with a vision to say we could have a parking ramp that had stores, a Caribou Coffee, a dry cleaner, other areas that could benefit from the parking and participate. When it's not busy, people can park there. It was a grand vision, and he was a pioneer in that. You see it all over now, but at the time when he started this, it wasn't. I think the other one that he really led the way on was express bus service. That was something that the Metropolitan Council wasn't doing a lot of at the time, and because we're in the suburbs a little farther out, it's really more about express service, getting to downtown
straight in, yeah.
Exactly. And he said, why don't we have a better ride? A coach bus would be a better experience for riders than the standard city bus. And hence this whole push on coach buses. Now you have Wi-Fi, you've got all kinds of comforts in terms of the express service. But that, again, it took a vision from somebody to move it, and that was Len and other leaders like Len to move that forward.
Well, Tom, this is a good time to point out for our listeners that they can go back to, I think it's our 10th podcast, and Len was a guest on the show. So he came before you, and he talks about that. He talks about kind of the creation of Southwest Transit and the growth of that. So
that's great.
Yeah,
and
a plug for podcast number 10.
That's solid. Right. There have been other innovative leaders in this area. One of the others was the Southwest Metro Public Safety Training Facility. I don't know if many listeners may know about that, but it's a police and fire training center that's located in Edina. It's close, and it's a partnership or a joint venture with Edina, Eden Prairie, Minnetonka, the Airport Commission,
and Bloomington.
And again, at that time, there weren't communities coming together to pool resources to build a facility. And so that was kind of a first of its kind, and really proud to work with those leaders to get that done. And that is actually how it's done now. So going forward, when people come to the legislature, they come as joint partners in both public safety, police, and fire for their funding. And that was really started here through some leadership and vision, and I think is a great model.
Correct. You are seeing a lot more of those now, but this idea that cities put their resources together and it's an efficient use of tax dollars to say we could have a training facility for multiple departments in one location and not everybody off at 5 different locations. Absolutely. So go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say that certainly I've had a privilege of working on a lot of really fun and exciting projects throughout my 22 years. We've had the pleasure of working for a lot of projects that people would recognize. We represented the Minnesota Twins in their effort to get a stadium and Target Field, which I think has been a wonderful asset for the community. We've helped support the Mall of America, the Minnesota Zoo, Children's Museum. There's been I think a lot of capital projects that people know about, but also really the opportunity to represent companies, healthcare companies like CDI or Twin Cities Orthopedics or Minnesota Oncology, and to help make people's lives better through either better insurance reimbursement or public policy changes that will reduce some of the red tape and bureaucracy in getting care or reducing costs.
Sure. So healthcare is kind of another area. I know you as the city government person, but healthcare is another area of yours.
Healthcare.
So can you fix it, please?
We're trying.
Okay.
We're trying.
All
It's
right.
not easy.
Okay.
Every time you fix one piece, there's something else that breaks.
Okay.
And so it seems like it's a never-ending task, but an important one. A lot of people's lives are impacted to a great degree on healthcare coverage, as well as how providers are able to help get that care to you. And
At
there's
a
lot.
reasonable cost.
Exactly.
Right. Well, Tom, thank you. I think you did a pretty good job of kind of leading us through your time at Eden Prairie, and then kind of going off and doing quite a bit. But you're anchored back here.
I am.
You're
indeed.
back here.
I'm back.
You may have left for different periods of time, but you are a current resident right now. So thinking about EP, a couple things about you and Eden Prairie. What would you say as a resident? What's the best thing about living here in our fine city?
Eden Prairie has so much to offer. It did when I was growing up, and it does today. Whether it's the mall or food options or the community center. For me, the sports options have been wonderful for our family. I have 2 children. I have a daughter that's 13 and a son that's 15, and both of them, whether it's swimming or tennis, hockey, baseball, soccer, we've participated in it all through the community.
Like all the club sports.
All the club
sports, right.
And it's just been wonderful for them, and for us living here, it's easy to get to, and it's well supported by not only those clubs but by the city. And so that's been a huge asset. The other one for me is probably more personal side, but my mom is retired and still lives in Eden Prairie, and she's been such a help for us raising our kids. Having her close is
still
just
over
fantastic.
still over by Duck Lake.
Still on Duck Lake.
Really?
Still on Duck Lake.
Okay. And does she say we do a good job of plowing her street?
She does.
Good.
She does.
I just threw that out there. You could have said she's not happy. I threw that out there. What's your favorite place in town? Whether it's just you or the family, or you mentioned the mall and community center. Is there anything else?
Absolutely. I would have to say Lion's Tap has a special place in my heart. Having grown up here, it's a much different community now than it was when I grew up. We used to get on our snowmobiles and take them over the bluffs to Lion's Tap for burger and fries. You can't quite do that anymore, but you can go to Lion's Tap and get the same burger and fries.
Same thing.
And it's a wonderful institution for this community.
Yeah, it is. It's historic. It is kind of funny where we are a modern, newer city, but the Lion's Tap kind of has that historical, classic, old school flavor that people like quite a bit. So what else are you passionate about? What other things besides the work with Meserly and Kramer? Where else is your passion?
Sure. One obviously is with my family. As I said, 2 kids, have a dog, Cooper, and that takes a lot of time.
What kind of dog is Cooper?
Cooper's a mini golden doodle, so it looks like a little teddy bear.
Okay. I have a mini golden doodle as well.
Nice.
So
ours is a little more poodle than golden, so he tends to get a little snappy here and there, but he's a good pooch.
Yeah. Well, how big is he?
He's about 34 pounds.
That's exactly Hank our
6 years old.
3 years old for us. In the first year, he's settled down quite a bit. Cooper has for you, because Hank was a little wilder.
He still runs around, still gets these spurts of energy and blows around the yard. But all in all,
I wanted the standard size, but
I
my
did
wife
too.
You did?
Yes.
My wife and kids wanted the mini. So then, how did I get my way? Is we got a second dog and we got a sheepadoodle.
Oh, don't say that. My daughter will. They are pushing so hard for
a
another
second dog.
Oh,
absolutely.
The pressure's immense.
Yep. Look in. There's all kinds of doodles now, because the whole thing for my family, it's allergy related.
That was my wife's thing. We avoided it for a long time until the kids got smart enough to realize there are hypoallergenic dogs, and that's exactly what happened. My daughter got on the internet and said, "Well, Mom, a golden doodle is hypoallergenic. You shouldn't have any problem with that." And it was harder for her to refute that.
Yeah.
Even though it still has a minor impact, but
does it really?
She caved.
Because my wife's got pretty acute allergies to dogs, and these dogs, nothing.
There's not a lot of hair around the house, which is really, really helpful.
That's good.
But I wouldn't change anything. Love the dog.
Good. I wasn't worried.
But the passions, certainly the family, and enjoy nonprofit work. As I said on the planning commission, but have worked over the years on a lot of different nonprofit boards, just trying to make life better for some people that are less fortunate, and feel it's a privilege to be able to do that. We built a cabin this year, so now there's a lot of time up north, as much as we can go, to enjoy the lake and boating and skiing. I love to as a family sport, we downhill ski.
Okay.
So we try and do that. Golf a little bit here and there.
Good. What, in terms of, and maybe it's the golf and the skiing and the cabin, but if you could just imagine the most relaxing situation for you, what would that be? Like a relaxing day or situation?
I would have to say the cabin. Sitting on, a lounger chair up on the deck overlooking the lake with the birds chirping and the wind blowing and the water. It's good for the soul.
Well, that sounds very, very enticing. But you recently built the cabin. So previously, were you traveling to different cabins, different locations, other family cabins? Like, what was the pull to say, okay, we're building our own cabin?
We did. For 20 years, we went essentially to Grandview. A few others, Madden's, Craigan's, up north. But my mom had my brother's family and our family every year spend a week up north. And we landed at Grandview, and my brother had a boat. So we had our experience through there. And over the last number of years, we said, maybe we should get a cabin. There's only so many years left with kids where they'll enjoy it or participate in it. And we figured, you know what, let's just do it. So we did it.
Good. What is something that most people haven't done but you've done?
I don't know how many people have or haven't done it, but I like doing things that are a little out of the ordinary. So skydiving is one.
Okay.
I did a tandem jump and filmed that, so that's always fun to watch what you look like when you're flying out of the plane and can't breathe, which is good. I've also done hang gliding. Okay. Did that over the cliffs by Lake Superior, which is really fantastic. Bungee jumping. And then a number of years ago, we rode the fastest roller coaster in the world at Prairie World in Abu Dhabi.
Ferrari World?
Ferrari World.
Okay.
Just crazy. They have these little cars that look like Ferraris. They strap you in. It's set on a catapult that slowly goes out and then just flings you 100 and some miles an hour around the track. And you try and breathe. It's a burst of excitement, but it is fun and exhilarating. So I'm glad that was something we had an opportunity to do and see.
So that to you is exciting.
Fun.
To be just flung out in a car. Wow.
It was a blast.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what was there? So then, if that's the fastest roller coaster in the world, what's the next thing? Because you've now done the fastest. Right. Is there like a bigger bungee jump? You said the extreme sports stuff. Right. What's coming up?
There are some. There probably are limits, because we were recently in Las Vegas, and they do have a bungee jump from the top of one of the casino, Stratosphere, where they have a kind of a glass floor bottom. And I chose not to do that one. I looked at it, but I looked down and I said,
You backed out?
I backed out.
Really?
I did. I was going to do it, but I did. I did their little roller coaster on the top. We did the other stuff, and there was a big line. But between those two things, I said, I don't know.
I would think after being at Ferrari World that you wouldn't wimp out on the Stratosphere bungee jump thing.
If the cord snapped, it's all concrete. It's a big target. Around target you're looking at it. It's all concrete.
So on a lot of the other extreme sports, it's a matter of knowing that something bad wouldn't happen.
You never know what will or won't happen, and I'm a firm believer that you got to take some risks in life, and what is meant to be. Yeah, and so I think, but there are limitations on the. Okay,
because you look at the people operating the ride, maybe, and you see the cord, and it might be a little
frayed on the edge.
And
you say,
no, I don't think so. No, all right, couple more, Tom. You're on a desert island. All you can bring is 3 things. What 3 things would you bring?
There's the practical side of me, and then there's the more probably realistic side. So on the practical side, I would say functional things like drinkable water, like a knife, like a match.
Yeah, we don't care about that.
That piece
that doesn't tell
to
us
live,
anything.
right?
Yeah, no.
But on the practical side, a Wi-Fi stick so I could have internet access and my phone or listen to music. A companion, whether that's the family or dog, somebody to do something with. Yeah. And then a hammock. You got to have something to sway on, right, in the breeze.
So the music, what music would you be listening to then?
I'm a product of rock and roll. So I grew up with Rolling Stones, Beatles, Aerosmith, Van Halen. So I do, and I still like rock and roll. I love the 80s, 70s and 80s
70s
music.
and 80s, that was your era.
It was, and I still listen to it, still like it. I branched a little farther into country and maybe some classical. I'm open to more music now, but at the core, if I'm going to go work out, it's going to be
rock and roll. Have you seen any of those bands live?
I have actually. Just the last time the Rolling Stones came, I went to see them, and I've seen Aerosmith here when they were here last time.
That just at the racetrack.
Leonard Skinner when they were here. I went to see the old Southern rock and roll.
Yeah, they still do a good job, but when the plane went down, a
little tough, not quite
when
the
plane
same.
Went down back,
but still some really good songs.
Well, what's interesting though is all those bands you mentioned that played in the late 70s into the 80s. It's almost 2020. And many of them still play.
Yeah.
The Who are playing like this weekend, or maybe it was last weekend. And the Rolling Stones were just in Chicago. Leonard Skinner just played recently. They're all still around.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Don't have quite the same vigor, but still producing.
So it doesn't make you
music.
that much older. I mean, you're still seeing these bands live that you're listening to as a kid in high school.
Right.
Doesn't age you at all.
None.
No.
None.
No. So, Tom, last thing. If you had to make one rule that everybody had to follow, what would that rule be?
I'm a big believer in the golden rule. It's a simple one, but I really believe strongly in doing unto others what you'd like done to yourself. And having a warm heart and appreciating people for things that they do is really important. And I think all of us are given support in life when we need it. And I am absolutely no different. I grew up here in Eden Prairie. For me, a lot of challenging things happened when I was young. So my father took his own life when I was in 5th grade and left my mom to have to raise, 2 children. And we weren't easy. It wasn't easy on her. And, we both probably did things that we regret and hung out with the wrong people and needed some help and guidance. And, and I got that in Eden Prairie. Kurt Conity was the assistant principal at Eden Prairie High School then, and for some reason decided to take me under his wing and say, I'm not going to let this kid fail. I'm going to help this kid get through high school. He maybe has some promise somewhere in there, and I'm going to make sure that he gets through school. And he did. And, and I'm thankful to this day that he was willing to do that. He just wrote a book recently and devoted one of his chapters to me and
that's awesome.
and the issues that he had to deal with and I think the ultimate success. But I think for everybody in life, you need to help others at some point, whether they're younger or older. But we all need that boost, and we can't ever, I think, forget the opportunity to provide that when you can.
Well, that's awesome. That's such a great inspiration for anybody who either is struggling when they're younger or for someone to help someone and take them under their wing. Because, I mean, you've obviously done just such a lot of great things, and you're doing well right now. So that's a great message.
Blessed to have good people in our lives, and fortunate to be here and appreciate it all. Yeah,
good. Well, Tom, I appreciate you coming on. Thanks for doing this.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your service and leadership for the city. I think Eden Prairie has been blessed with a lot of really good leaders, whether it was Dr. Gene Harris as mayor or Nancy Tara-Lukens or Ron Case and the city managers. You're an exceptional city manager, and I think that there haven't been too many that have had a chance to work with Carl Julie, for years. But they're people that stay for a long period of time, and the city is blessed to have that leadership. Because I think a lot of people aren't really sure what a city manager does, what exactly your role is and how that plays out. But it's really important and practical for a lot of day-to-day things that we all expect, whether it's the snow plowing or whether it's what we pay in property taxes or transportation.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's all about, like you said earlier, the people that help you and support you and that you're surrounded by. So the city's a great place because of that, the people that all work together for a common good. So it makes it pretty easy. But thanks, Tom.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.